daughter called me from a number I hadn't seen in 9 years. Except she couldn't have. Because I watched them lower her casket into the ground at Meadowbrook Cemetery in Knoxville, Tennessee, on a Tuesday morning in March. And I've been talking to that patch of earth ever since. The call came in at 6:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because I was already up, already sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee going cold the way it always does when I forget to drink it, staring out at the backyard when her old tire swing still hangs from the oak tree. I haven't taken it down. I know I should. 9 years is a long time to leave a tire swing up for a girl who isn't coming back. But I can't do it. My phone buzzed on the table and I glanced at it the way you do when you're half asleep and not really expecting anything. The screen showed a number I didn't recognize at first. Then something in my chest went very still, the way it does right before something breaks. I knew that number. I'd known it for 23 years, from the day we got her first cell phone when she was 16, and I made her recite it back to me 3 times in the driveway until I had it memorized. 7 digits I could still dial in my sleep. 7 digits I'd called 100 times after she was gone, just to hear the voicemail, just to hear her say, "You've reached Lily, leave me something good." They disconnected it eventually, 18 months after the accident. I'd paid the bill every single month until the carrier finally told me the number had been reassigned. But here it was on my screen at 6:47 on a Wednesday morning calling me. I answered it. Of course I answered it. There was silence for a moment. Then a woman's voice, cautious and quiet. "Hello, I'm sorry to call so early. Is this Harold?" I couldn't speak. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I suddenly had too much of it and none of it would move. "Hello," she said again. "I got this name from my contacts. It just says Harold Dad. I don't know why I have it saved that way. I'm sorry. I know this is strange." I gripped the edge of the kitchen table. "Who is this?" My voice came out older than I expected, rougher. "My name is Dana. Dana Whitfield. I live in Asheville. I'm sorry, I really don't mean to bother you. I just found this number in my phone while I was looking for something else, and I saw it said Harold Dad, and I thought..." She stopped. "I thought I should call. I don't know why. I just had this feeling that I should. Dana. My daughter's name was Lily. Lily Ann Kowalski. But Dana, my wife's middle name was Dana. We'd almost named our daughter Dana before we settled on Lily. It was on the short list. I'd never told anyone that. How old are you?" I asked, and I don't know why that was the first thing I said. It just came out. A pause. "I'm 32. At least, that's what they told me. I'm sorry, I have some memory problems. From an old injury. I don't remember a lot of things." Lily would have been 32 in April. I set my coffee mug down very carefully on the table because I didn't trust my hands anymore. "Dana," I said, "can I ask you something? This is going to sound crazy." "Okay, do you remember anything? Anything at all from before your injury?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Pieces," she said. "I remember a tire swing. I remember a tire swing. I remember the smell of sawdust. I remember a man teaching me to play chess on a board with a cracked corner piece. I remember..." She stopped again. "I remember someone calling me Lily Bird." The mug hit the floor. I don't remember the next few minutes clearly. I know I was crying. I know I told her to stay on the phone. I know I walked in circles around my kitchen like a man who'd forgotten which direction anything was in. I know I ended up sitting on the floor with my back against the refrigerator, which is where my neighbor Gene found me 20 minutes later when he came by to return my hedge trimmers and saw me through the window. Gene got me off the floor, handed me back my phone, sat with me at the table while I explained badly what had happened. He's been my neighbor for 30 years and one of the few people who understood what losing Lily had done to me. He listened to the whole thing without saying a word, which is one of the things I've always appreciated about him. "Call her back," he said when I finished. I did. Dana answered on the first ring like she'd been sitting there waiting. We talked for 2 hours. I told her I needed to meet her in person. She agreed without hesitation, which surprised me. She said she'd had these feelings before, like certain things mattered more than they should, like her feet were pointed in a direction her brain hadn't caught up to yet. Asheville is 4 hours from Knoxville on a good day. I left that afternoon. I need to tell you something about Lily before I go further, so you understand what those 9 years were like. She was my only child. Her mother, my wife Patricia, passed from ovarian cancer when Lily was 11 years old. It was the two of us after that, and we were close in the way that people become close when they both went through the same fire. She was the kind of person who left notes on the bathroom mirror for you when you were having a bad week. She remembered every single thing anyone ever told about themselves and would ask about it months later out of nowhere because she was actually listening. She wanted to be a nurse. She was 2 semesters away from her degree when the accident happened. February, 9 years ago. She'd been driving back from a late shift at the hospital where she was doing her clinical hours. Ice on the road outside of Sevierville. Her car went off 4111 and down an embankment into a creek. First responders found the vehicle submerged. They found a body. I identified her. I stood in that studio room and looked at my daughter's face and said, "Yes, that's her." I brought her home and buried her next to her mother. The grief that followed isn't something I can explain to anyone who hasn't lived it. You walk around with a hole in the center of your chest that never closes. You go to the grocery store, you pay your bills, you talk to people. But there's a part of you that has been put in the ground and you know you're never getting it back. Except now I was driving 4 hours to Asheville on a Thursday afternoon in October because a woman named Dana had called me from my dead daughter's phone number and she knew about the tire swing. I got to Asheville around 7 in the evening. We'd agreed to meet at a place called the Early Girl Eatery on Wall Street, downtown. I parked a block away and sat in my truck for 15 minutes, telling myself to bleep. The restaurant was warm and noisy in the way that southern diners always are on weekday evenings. People coming off work and settling in for the kind of meal that doesn't require any effort. I asked for a table near the window and ordered sweet tea I didn't taste. At 7:22, the door opened and a woman walked in. The first thing I noticed was how she moved. Lily always walked with her chin slightly up, not from arrogance, just from habit. The way some people hold themselves when they've been tall since middle school. This woman walked the same way. She was wearing a green jacket and her hair was darker than Lily's had been. And she was heavier, her face rounder. But her hands, when she spotted me and lifted one in a small, uncertain wave, were Lily's hands. Long fingers. The second knuckle on her right index finger crooked from an old break she got falling off that tire swing when she was 9. I stood up. I don't remember deciding to. She walked to the table and we stood there looking at each other for a moment that felt like it had its own weather. "Harold," she said. "Yes," I said. "Sit down, please sit down." She sat. I sat. The waitress came and Dana ordered coffee and neither of us said anything until of us said anything until it arrived. "You look like someone I know," she said finally. "You look like someone I lost," I said. She wrapped both hands around her mug. Her knuckles were white. "Tell me about her." So I did. I started at the beginning, the way you do when you're not sure which parts matter most, so you just hand over all of it. I told her about Patricia dying and how Lily had climbed into my lap that night even though she was 11 and considered herself too old for that, and how she'd said, "It's just us now, Dad, but we're going to be okay." I told her about the tire swing and the chessboard, and how she'd called me Lilybird since she was 4 because she thought lilies looked like they were trying to fly. I told her about her wanting to be a nurse, about the Christmas she drove 4 hours in a snowstorm just to make sure I didn't spend the holiday alone, about the way she'd hum while she was studying. Always the same handful of songs. Dana sat completely still while I talked. At some point, tears started running down her face, and she didn't wipe them away, just let them fall. "The chessboard," she said when I stopped. "It has a cracked corner piece. The white bishop. You fixed it with a piece of electrical tape." That tape had been on that bishop for 15 years. "And the humming," she said. "I hum. My coworkers tease me about it. They say I don't even realize I'm doing it." Lily hadn't realized it either. "Dana," I said, "I need to ask you something directly. I need you to be honest with me even if it sounds impossible. Okay? What do you actually remember about your accident? About where you came from before?" She was quiet for a long time. "I was found outside of Gatlinburg in the spring," she said. 8 years ago, a couple found me on the side of the road. I was disoriented, I had a serious head injury, I had no ID. They took me to the hospital in Maryville, and I was there for almost 3 months. When I woke up properly, I didn't know my name, didn't know where I was from, didn't know anything. The social worker there helped me put together paperwork. I picked Dana because a nurse said I responded to it when they were trying different names. She paused. "Whitfield was just a name they assigned. It's not a real last name for me. It doesn't feel like mine. Gatlinburg, which is just across the mountain from Survival. 20 minutes from where Lily's car went off the road." "What year?" I asked. They told me it was 2017. March, I think. My heart was doing something complicated. Lily's accident had been February 2016. That was over a year of time unaccounted for. Dana, the accident they found you after, that's from 2017. Lily's accident was February 2016. There's a year in between. She stared at me. I know, she said quietly. I've thought about that. I've thought about it a lot. I don't know where I was in between. I've never known. I have no memory of that time. It's just dark. One more question that needed answering. One more piece of the thing I couldn't yet see the shape of. But I knew what I was looking at. I knew the way you know your own handwriting, the way you know the sound of someone's footstep in the hallway. You don't need proof to know. Proof is for the part of your brain that needs convincing. The rest of you already understood. We sat in that diner for 3.5 hours. I talked and she listened. She asked questions that nobody who didn't know us could have known to ask. She asked what Patricia's favorite song was. She asked if we'd ever had a dog. She asked about the chessboard, where I'd gotten it, who taught me to play. Things I hadn't told her, things she just seemed to reach for out of the air. Patricia's favorite song was Landslide by Fleetwood Mac. We'd had a beagle named Scout who died when Lily was 15. I'd gotten the chessboard from my father, who'd gotten it from his father, and the cracked bishop had been cracked for as long as any of us could remember. Dana knew the name of the song before I said it. She sang 4 bars under her breath when I mentioned it, unprompted, and then looked up at me with this expression on her face like she'd surprised herself. We agreed on a DNA test. She didn't hesitate. I drove her to an urgent care facility that offered paternity testing, and we gave samples that night because I couldn't have slept otherwise, and they told us results would take 5 to 7 days. I drove back to Knoxville in the dark. I don't remember the drive. I remember pulling into my own driveway at 1 in the morning and sitting in my truck looking at the house and thinking that it was the same house it had always been, and also something fundamental had shifted inside it, the way a painting shifts when you realize the frame was crooked. The tire swing moved in the wind. I watched it for a while. Those 7 days were the longest of my life, including the ones after the accident. At least after the accident, I knew what I was mourning. This was different. This was hope, which is a much harder thing to carry than grief. Because grief has already happened and hope hasn't yet. Dana called every day. We talked for an hour each time. She told me about her life in Asheville. She worked at a medical supply company. She had a small apartment near the River Arts District. She had 2 close friends named Terry and Bev. She had a cat named Oatmeal. She'd been with the company for 5 years and was good at her job. She liked hiking on the weekends. She didn't like crowded places or loud music. Lily had never liked crowds either. She used to say crowds made her feel like she was dissolving. On day 4, I finally told my neighbor the whole thing. He sat at my kitchen table and listened to everything, and when I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Have you talked to the sheriff's department?" he said, "about the original accident?" I hadn't. I'd been so focused on Dana, on the possibility of what she was, that I hadn't thought about the mechanics, about how any of this could have happened, about what the county had told me when I identified my daughter's body and buried her. I called the Sevier County Sheriff's Department the next morning. I explained who I was, explained what was happening, asked if there was any way to get access to the original accident report and the medical examiner's findings from February 2016. The woman on the phone was patient with me. She said she'd look into it and have someone call me back. A deputy named Marshall Ayers called me that afternoon. He pulled the file. He was quiet on the phone for a longer time than I was comfortable with. And then he said, "Mr. Kowalski, I want to be straight with you. There were some complications with this case that I'm only seeing now because I'm looking at it fresh." I sat down. The accident had happened at night in freezing rain on a stretch of 4 in 11 that doesn't have much lighting. The car had gone down a 30-foot embankment into Dumpling Creek. The creek had been running high from snowmelt. The body recovered from the vehicle had been badly damaged. Identification had been made on the basis of the vehicle registration, a purse found in the passenger seat, and what the responding medical examiner had believed was a visual match. But here was the thing. There had been a second report filed 3 days after the accident. A woman found unresponsive in the Greenbrier area of the national park, approximately 8 miles from the crash site. Exposure, blunt force trauma, disoriented. She'd been taken to the University of Tennessee Medical Center in Knoxville. She'd been listed as a Jane Doe. That Jane Doe's case had never been connected to the accident. The accident was considered closed. The Jane though was treated, transferred to a rehabilitation facility after 6 weeks, and eventually lost to the system the way people sometimes are when there's no family looking for them. Because as far as anyone knew, the family had already identified the body and closed the case. Deputy IS told me this in a level voice, and I could tell he was uncomfortable with it. The way people are when the system fails, and they're the one who has to hand you the bill. I asked him about the body, about who had actually been in that car. He was quiet again. There was a separate accident that same night, he said slowly. A hit and run on 321, about 12 miles away. A woman was struck walking along the shoulder. No ID recovered. Her case was never solved. It took me a moment to understand what he was suggesting. Two women. One night, two accidents, 12 miles apart. One woman identified from a vehicle as Lily Kowalski and buried accordingly. One woman found in the national park days later, no identity, eventually lost in the system. If the identification from the vehicle had been wrong, if the woman in that car hadn't been Lily, then where had Lily been for the days between the accident and when the Jane Doe was found in the park? The deputy's best theory, leading from notes in the file, was that she'd been thrown from the vehicle possibly into the creek, survived and made her way, disoriented, injured in the cold, into the park. Into the park. 8 miles was a long way in February in the mountains, but hypothermia can do strange things to the mind, make you walk when you should stop, take you in circles, keep you moving when movement is the only thing left. She'd survived. Somehow she'd survived and she'd made it 8 miles, and someone had found her on a trail and called 911. And because everyone thought Lily Kowalski was already in the ground, nobody came looking. The DNA results came on the 6th day. I was at the kitchen table, same as always, coffee going cold. My phone buzzed with an email notification. I set the phone down and didn't pick it up for 4 minutes. Then I opened it. The report was full of language I didn't entirely understand, percentages in the alleles and statistical probabilities. But one line was in plain English, and that was the only line that mattered. Probability of biological paternity, 99.97%. I called Dana. She answered before the first ring finished. I already got it, she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Harold, I already got it. I know, I said. What does this mean? She said, and I could hear in her voice that she knew what it meant. She just needed someone to say it. It means you're my daughter, I said. It means you've always been my daughter. The sound she made is not something I'm going to try to put into words. It's not mine to describe. We cried for a long time on the phone. Long enough that the coffee went truly cold past the point of saving. At some point, I got up and made a fresh pot without really thinking about it. Still on the phone, just needing to do something with my hands. Just needing the familiar smell of it. There were logistics after that. There always are. The medical examiner's office in Sevier County opened an investigation into the original identification. The case of the unidentified woman found near Gatlinburg in 2017 had to be examined in relation to Lily's accident the year before. There were long gaps still. That year between the accident and when Dana was found, that may never be fully explained. The working theory is that she survived and was taken in by someone, possibly a family in a remote area who didn't know what else to do, and that her condition deteriorated again before she was found on the roadside. But we may never know for certain. Traumatic brain injuries are strange and vast, and memory doesn't always give back what it takes. Dana started therapy with a specialist in trauma and neurological memory loss. The doctor told her early on not to chase the memories, to let them come if they came, and not to grieve if they didn't. Some have come. Small ones, fragments like shards of something whole. She remembered the smell of the hospital where she did her clinicals before I told her she'd been in nursing school. She remembered the sound of Patricia's laugh. She described it to me one Sunday on the phone, and I had to sit down, because she described it perfectly, the way it was always a little surprised, like she hadn't expected anything to be that funny. She remembered being small and sick with something, and lying on the couch under an old quilt while someone checked her forehead over and over. That quilt is still in the linen closet. I haven't used it in 9 years, but I've never thrown it away. Dana. She still goes by Dana most of the time, and I respect that. It's the name she's known herself by for nearly a decade. Moved back to Knoxville 4 months after the DNA results. Not into my house, she has her own apartment over near Bearden, 15 minutes away, but she comes for dinner on Sundays. I make whatever I can remember Patricia making. Meatloaf, potato soup, The green bean casserole from the recipe card that's been in my kitchen drawer since 1987. Dana eats and tells me about her week, and sometimes she remembers things mid-sentence, little sparks, and she'll stop and look at something and say, "We used to do that," or "I knew that already," in this quiet, wondering voice. She brought Oatmeal the cat with her. The cat hates me, for the record, but Dana says he hates everyone except her, which tracks. A few weeks ago, I took down the tire swing. Not because I'm done with her memory, or because I'm ready to pretend those 9 years didn't happen, but because she's not gone anymore. You don't need a shrine for someone who's going to come over for dinner on Sunday. You don't need to hold on to the absence of a person when the person is sitting in your kitchen asking how long to bake the casserole. We went to Meadowbrook Cemetery together the weekend after she moved back. Stood in front of the headstone with Lily's name on it. Dana was quiet for a long time, looking at the dates, looking at the ground. "Who's actually there?" she asked. "That's something we're still working to find out. The county has been cooperating and the investigation continues. There may be a family somewhere who lost a woman on 321 that same February night and never got answers. If that's the case, they deserve answers. They deserve to know what happened and where she is. We're trying to help with that in whatever way we can." Dana touched the top of the headstone gently. "I'm sorry," she said to whoever is. "I'm sorry you were here and nobody knew your name. We'll have the headstone changed. We haven't figured out the right words yet. It's a harder thing to write than you'd think. People ask me how I'm doing with all of it. Friends, neighbors, the people at my church who were there when I buried her and who watched me go through the years that followed. They want to know how you process something like this, how you make peace with the fact that you identified your own child's body and were wrong, that your daughter was alive and somewhere else and you didn't know. I don't have a clean answer for them. There are days it's too big to hold and I just have to set it down for a while. There's guilt in it that I'm still working through with someone qualified to help me. The question of how did I not know is one that doesn't have a useful answer, and also one I can't stop asking. But then she calls, and her number comes up on my screen. Her real number now, the one I have for her, and I answer, and she says, "Hey Dad," the way she started doing over the past few weeks, casual, like it's always been this way, and the question doesn't seem as large. She brought me a card on Father's Day. It was a regular card, the kind you'd find in any pharmacy, with a picture of a sunset on it. Inside, she'd written, "I don't remember everything, but I remember that you're my dad." That one stayed. I've got it on the refrigerator, right next to the green bean casserole recipe. Last Sunday, she got here early and found me out back in the yard, filling in the hole where the tire swing post had been. She stood on the back porch watching me work. I didn't hear her come out. "You want help?" she asked. I looked up. She was wearing one of those oversized sweatshirts she likes, coffee in hand, squinting in the morning light. She looked in that moment so much like Patricia that it was almost difficult to look directly at her. "Nah," I said. "I got it." She sat on the porch steps and drank her coffee while I finished. We didn't talk, we didn't need to. The yard smelled like October, like leaves and cold dirt and something keen underneath. And the light was that particular Tennessee light that happens in the fall when everything goes gold. When I was done, I came and sat on the steps next to her. She leaned over and put her head on my shoulder, just for a second, the way she used to do when she was small. Then she straightened up and sipped her coffee and looked out at the yard. "Looks better," she said. "Yeah," I said. "It does." I've thought a lot about what kept me going through those 9 years. It wasn't anything dramatic. It was small, stubborn things. Keeping the tire swing up, paying a phone bill for a number nobody was using, answering that number when telemarketers called just to hear a voice say the digits out loud. None of that felt like strength at the time. It felt like an old man refusing to let go of something that had already left his hands. But I think now that's exactly what it was. A kind of quiet refusal that didn't know what it was waiting for, only that it wasn't done yet. What happened to Dana wasn't fair. None of it was. The system that was supposed to protect her failed in about 6 different ways on the same night, and the cost of those failures was 9 years of her life lived as someone she wasn't. 9 years of my life spent talking to the wrong patch of ground. I won't dress that up. It was a failure of institutions that were supposed to do better, and there are people who still need to answer for that. Fairness is something you build, not something that just happens. And when the people responsible for building it get lazy or overwhelmed or careless, the ones who pay for it are always the ones who can least afford to. But here's what I've come to understand about those 9 years. about what I did and didn't do, and about what it produced. I kept showing up, not heroically, not with any particular plan. I just kept showing up to the life that was in front of me, kept the porch light on even when there was nobody coming home, kept the chessboard on the shelf, kept the quilt in the closet. And Dana, whoever she was during those last years, whatever she went through that we may never fully piece together, she kept showing up too. She woke up without a name and built one. She woke up without a history and made a life anyway. That's not luck. That's character. And character is a thing you can't shake out of a person no matter what you take from them. There's something I've started to believe that I didn't have words for before all of this. The people we love leave marks on us that go deeper than memory. Dana didn't remember me. She didn't remember her mother, didn't remember the kitchen or the tire swing or the chessboard with the taped bishop, but she hummed the same songs. She walked with her chin up. She gravitated toward medical work even when she didn't know why. The things Patricia and I put into her when she was small, they were still there, buried under everything that had been taken, waiting. You can take away a person's name and their history and their whole conscious record of who they are. You cannot take away what they were built from. I think about that when things are hard, when the guilt comes back or the grief does, which they still do sometimes, and I expect they always will. I think about the fact that Dana sat across from me in a diner in Asheville and sang 4 bars of her mother's favorite song without knowing why. I think about what that means. That the things we do for the people we love are never wasted, even when we can't see where they went. She called me last Sunday to say she'd be a few minutes late. She said it the way you say it to someone whose time you respect, someone whose table you actually want to be at. And I thought about the version of me that spent 9 years thinking he'd never hear her voice again. And I thought, keep going. Even when you can't see the reason, keep the light on, keep showing up. You don't always get to know in advance what you're holding things together for.